It's the most highly anticipated visit to our nation since maybe the Beatles, and this afternoon he arrived. Pope Francis touched down on U.S. soil just before 4 p.m. for the start of an historic trip, including a ceremony at the White House, the first ever canonization in the U.S., a speech before a joint session of Congress, also a first for a pope, and people contact that makes Secret Service agents prematurely gray. With big expectations, the question is, can Pope Francis live up to all the hype? And here in Boston, we're asking, why not us? Joining me to take up these issues and more are Marjorie Egan, spirituality columnist at CruxNow.com, co-host of Boston Public Radio with me, and she just won the award for Best Commentary from the Religion News Writers of America. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ann Barrett Doyle of BishopAccountability.org, a group calling for more attention to the sex abuse crisis. And good to see you, Ann, too. And Tom Groom, director of Boston College's Center for the Church in the 21st Century, and the author of the book, What Makes Us Catholic. Professor, it's great to see you as well. I know how excited you are, and it's shared by a lot of your fellow Catholics. Why the huge excitement, Marjorie Egan?
Well, because for half a century, if you are a Catholic like I am, you've been kind of told you're a bad person. You know, you're a bad person if you use birth control, you're a bad person if you're divorced and remarried, if you're gay, I mean, absolutely forget about it. If you have an abortion, forget about it. Everything was about judgment, what you were doing wrong. And now we have a guy that's saying, no, come back. Well, who seems to understand how real people live and that good people make mistakes, but we still want you to come back to the church. He's welcoming. And
I think it's fair to say, after I read your piece in the Globe this weekend, your excitement is tempered a little bit. Yes, why?
Well, I find him very appealing, too, and he's saying some very important thing about the people at the periphery. But the people really at the peripheries of the church are those who've been victimized by the church itself. And he's done a few things that point in the right direction, but we need him to take far more decisive measures.
What does that mean? I mean, I know, for example, I read your piece, you say there is zero tolerance here. There's surely not zero tolerance around the world. Well, is your concern that he's not formally meeting with survivors and he's not coming to Boston? What's the concern?
I'm not concerned about that. My number one concern is that this is the priesthood has no zero tolerance provision worldwide. The Pope keeps promising zero tolerance and invoking it, and yet no such restriction exists in universal canon law. It is still okay to keep child molesters in ministry outside the United States.
Well, including some who are abusers here who are just transferred to Latin and South America. We talked about. Tom Groom, what's the goal here? What's the end game? Is it to move public opinion on things like climate change, abortion, income inequality, or is it just to bring lapsed Catholics back into the flock?
I suppose it'll be a little of both, Jim. I mean, he's certainly anxious to evangelize or re-evangelize or to take old, tired faith and to reinvigorate it. So that's certainly part of his agenda. But I think he knows the political imports of what he's saying spiritually. I mean, he comes as a spiritual leader. He's going to speak from a faith perspective. He's going to engage our hearts and our souls rather than our political allegiances. And yet what he's saying obviously has significant political implications. But I think he'll be a study in contrast. I think he'll be closer to Bernie Sanders financially than he would be to Donald Trump. I think he'll be closer to Carly Fiorina on abortion or something than he would be to Hillary Clinton. So he's going to confuse the heck out of us. But in a sense, if we listen to him with our hearts, with an open heart,
let's take
I think that's when he'll speak best.
On the Bernie Sanders side of things, if we care, the Barack Obama side, the climate change, income inequality, immigration, I've read you quoted the last few days that a lot of the conservative Catholics who have criticized people like her, Marjorie Egan, for being cafeteria Catholics, what do they do now when the leader of their church embraces essentially an Obama agenda that they abhor? How do they react to that?
I think the shoe is on the other foot, Jim. And I mean, and bless them. I mean, because for quite a while, for the previous 35 years or so before this Pope, I mean, people who have a more liberal persuasion or a more reasonable persuasion at times were indeed dismissed as if they were simply picking and choosing. But I think it's fascinating that the big Catholic money of this country, the big Jewish money of this country is typically liberal. The big Catholic money is typically conservative. And so they will hear something, and it'd be interesting to see if they follow the teachings of the Holy Father, as they've been quoting for quite some time.
Do you think the expectations are out of whack? I mean, when you read all the reports about what happened in Cuba, he did not take on the leadership directly. He did not use words, I read John Allen, your colleague, saying, he never used the expression religious freedom. He made his point, but in an indirect kind of way. Are we going to be disappointed here?
Well, gosh, I hope not. I hope this is going to be a great moment in Congress. I hope he is going to talk about some of these big issues because, again, you know, as he said at the beginning of his papacy, all we heard about was the so-called pelvic issues in the church. That's all we heard about. And there was a sense that a lot of American bishops will all become Republicans based on those issues, that he's talking about the poor and the obligation. You know, it's easy to criticize and judge people. It's not so easy to take in those refugee families from Syria. It's not so easy to take care of the so-called undeserving poor. And he's talking about those hard, Christ-like choices.
So you don't think the bar is too high at all?
Well, I mean, he could be a total bomb.
No, I wasn't
suppose,
suggesting. But I mean, are you worried that the expectations are up here and nobody, even the Pope, can meet him?
Well, I think if anybody can meet him, this one can meet them. I think he has a public persona that's tremendously genuine. It's not just the hype. I mean, the man is a genuine article. He's a true Christian. He's embracing the deep values of the gospel. And it's amazing how appealing they are on the world stage. And again, I think he'd be talking about building bridges rather than building walls. He'd be talking about welcoming the stranger rather than sending home the illegals. So I think he's going to confront us in a very concerted kind of way.
Do you think he's not coming here because of the issue that you care most about? Why is he not coming to Boston? I mean, no one really knows. Marty Walsh has told us, and other people, he asked him, he was told when he was in the Vatican recently, Marty Walsh, that if a day was added to the trip, which it has not been, Boston will be put on the...
You know, Pope Benedict met with Boston victims, though not in Boston, when he came in 2008. Maybe they feel Boston has gotten enough attention. I will say though, you know, pertaining to what you said, Tom, it would be terrific if he took this candor and this courage and applied it to the worst crisis facing the Catholic Church, which is the sex abuse crisis. You know, he has done something significant, which is that he has said they're going to create a tribunal to hold bishops accountable.
That's under Cardinal O'Malley, is it not?
Cardinal O'Malley, I think, is largely responsible for that, but it's going to be held to an inferior standard, which is this very lenient standard of canon law.
Do you have more patience than she does on this?
I mean, we'll never do enough, really, to make up for the terrible crimes that were committed. There is no way to meet in a sense, well, there is the possibility of healing, but I mean, we haven't done nearly enough. But on the other hand, I think we've done better than we used to do. Like
well, the U.S. has done better. Do you think the
U.S. have done better, but it would be
better?
marvelous if the Dallas Charter was applied to the world. So in a sense, the U.S. bishops have done better than any other episcopacy that I know of. So, but if it could be applied to the whole universal church. Now, how do you do that, especially in very diverse cultures, in Muslim cultures and so on? There are complexities there, but we've got a long way to go.
15 seconds. Where are you on the patience spectrum on this issue?
Well, I think Anna's right. The Pope has got to do more. They've got to haul in some of these bishops that let this happen and nail them. And I'd be very anxious for that to happen. I hope it does.
And 10 minutes ago in Pennsylvania, a priest was convicted of child sexual abuse, sex tourism in Honduras. I mean, this has to stop. A U.S. priest who was known to his diocese, these allegations 5 years ago, has just been stopped by Homeland Security. So
we're going to follow every minute of the next 6 days. Marjorie Egan, I'll see you tomorrow at 11.
You will.
Ann Barrett, great to see you.
Thank
Tom
you, Jim.
Zoom, pleasure
Jim.
as always.
As always.
Thank you so much.